What if everything you've ever worked for, the legacy, the company, the fortune, was left to someone else? Lexi Morgan sat in silence as her father's will was read, watching her sister Isabel take everything from her, the business, the property, and every asset. It was exactly what she had always expected. But her mother, who had been dismissed as a simple housewife, had been building an empire of her own, one Lexi inherited, worth far more than anything their father left behind. Isabel thought she won. Lexi was about to show her just how wrong she was. Stay tuned to see how Lexi reclaims her future. My channel's struggling, so if you're intrigued, please comment 1 to help me out. Thank you for watching, I appreciate it. Subscribe to see how it ends, and I wish you all good health. Mr. Abernathy's voice was calm and measured as he read my father's will. Each word seemed to shrink the mahogany-paneled office, the weight of finality pressing down on me with suffocating force. I sat motionless, my hands folded in my lap, while Isabel's smirk stretched wider. The sunlight streaming through the window caught the diamonds on her bracelet, the one Dad had given her last year, yet another reminder of his unshakable favoritism. At 32, I was witnessing the culmination of a lifetime of my father choosing her over me, just as I had always expected. The property at 1542 Pine Grove Avenue, 789 Lakeview Drive, and the summer home in Newport, all to Isabel Morgan Pierce. Mr. Abernathy continued, adjusting his glasses. The family business, Morgan Communications, including all assets and subsidiaries, also to Isabel Morgan Pierce. Isabel leaned back in her chair, practically glowing with triumph. She had dressed the part, a sleek black designer dress, her nails impeccably manicured, her hair styled with precision. She was everything my father had valued: ambitious, obedient, married to the right man, a mother to the right children. I, on the other hand, had disappointed him at every turn. A marine biologist instead of a corporate successor. Divorced from the man he'd chosen for me after I refused to tolerate his affairs. Carving out my own life and success, one that didn't fit into his narrow definition of achievement. "Is that all?" Isabel asked, her voice dripping with false sympathy. She turned to me with a practiced pout. "Oh, Lexi, I'm so sorry, but you know how Dad felt about your choices." I met her gaze steadily, refusing to flinch. "I'm well aware, Jess." Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat. "There is a small personal effects account set aside for Olivia, containing family photographs and some jewelry from your grandmother." Isabel let out a sharp laugh. "Well, at least you got the family photos. Not sure where you'll put them in that tiny apartment of yours." I rose, smoothing the fabric of my dress. "Are we done here, Mr. Abernathy?" The lawyer nodded, clearly relieved I wasn't making a scene. He had probably seen enough inheritance battles to know they rarely ended without drama. But I wasn't going to give Isabel the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. "Lexi!" she called out as I reached the door. "Don't worry, I'll make sure you're taken care of. Maybe there's even a position for you at Morgan Communications, something entry-level, of course." I turned, offering her a tight smile. "That's generous, Jess, but I'll be just fine." The drive home was silent. The trees lining the road were painted in hues of gold and red. Mom had loved this time of year. She would have hated what Dad had done today. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabel. "Dinner tonight? We should talk about your future." I ignored it, just as I had been ignoring her hollow gestures since Dad's funeral last week. Instead, I parked in front of my small apartment, a charming craftsman house I'd bought mortgage-free 3 years ago. Inside, I went straight to my office, unlocked the bottom drawer, and retrieved a thick manila envelope. Mom had given it to me 2 years ago, just months before her unexpected passing. "Don't open this until after your father's gone," she had said, her frail hands gripping mine. "Promise me, Olivia." I had promised, and now, as I carefully peeled back the flap, I finally understood why. Inside were several documents, and at the top was a letter in Mom's elegant handwriting. "My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, then your father is gone, and I'm sure he's done exactly what I feared. Your father was a brilliant businessman, but he never understood what truly mattered. He let his pride and outdated beliefs blind him to the most valuable thing he had, a daughter with vision, integrity, and the heart to change the world. What he also never realized is that while he was building Morgan Communications, I was building something of my own. 20 years ago, I began investing in sustainable technology companies. Your research on marine conservation inspired me. While your father dismissed your work as youthful idealism, I saw the future. These holdings have grown considerably, worth far more than Morgan Communications. Everything is in your name, transferred slowly and legally over the years through a network of investments your father never thought to question. Isabel can't touch a cent of it. Use it wisely, my darling girl. Make the difference I always knew you could. All my love. Mom. My hands trembled as I sifted through the documents. Stock certificates, investment portfolios, offshore accounts an empire quietly built under my father's nose. He'd never had a clue. The sheer scale of it made my head spin. My phone buzzed. Another text from Isabel. Seriously, Lexi, we need to talk about arrangements. Dad would have wanted us to work together. I picked up my phone, my pulse steady this time. I replied, You're right, we should talk. Why don't you come over tomorrow morning? I have something to show you. That night, I stayed up late poring over Mom's documents, marveling at her brilliance. She had invested in wind farms, solar technology, ocean cleanup initiatives, everything I had dedicated my career to. While Dad had dismissed my work as idealistic nonsense, Mom had been quietly securing the future. I thought about Isabel's expression in the lawyer's office, the way she'd always sided with Dad, always belittled my choices. Tomorrow, she would finally see the truth. At exactly 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. Isabel stood on my doorstep in another designer outfit, her expression a calculated blend of concern and superiority. Her eyes flicked over my home, barely concealing her disdain. Oh, Lexi, she said, stepping inside, we really need to talk about getting you set up properly. This isn't the kind of place a Morgan should be living in. I ignored her and led her to the dining room. You're right, Jess, we do need to talk. There's something Mom wanted you to see. Her expression hardened slightly at the mention of Mom. They had never been close. Isabel was Dad's daughter through and through. What are you talking about? She asked. I gestured to the documents laid out on the table. Take a look. Isabel's manicured fingers hesitated before reaching for the papers. I watched as her smirk slowly faded, replaced by disbelief. Her hands began to shake. Her face drained of color, then flushed red with anger. This can't be real, she stammered. Mom was just a housewife. She didn't know anything about business. I almost laughed. Mom had spent years playing the role of the quiet, supportive wife, letting Dad and Isabel talk business while she built something bigger than either of them had ever imagined. Oh, it's real, I said, my voice steady. Every document is verified. Mom knew exactly what she was doing, and now, so do I. Isabel sank into a chair, her perfect posture faltering. But Dad's company, Morgan Communications, is yours. Just like Dad wanted, I finished for her. But Mom's legacy, that belongs to me, and it's worth about 10 times what you inherited. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the soft tapping of Isabel's nails against the table. She was recalibrating, strategizing, trying to find her footing in this new reality. Finally, she spoke, slipping into the smooth, persuasive tone she used in boardrooms. We could work together, pool our resources. Think about it, Lexi, with Morgan Communications infrastructure and these assets. No, Jess, I cut her off. That's not what Mom wanted, and it's not what I want. You got exactly what Dad intended for you. This is my path. Her mask slipped just for a second, revealing something raw beneath. Anger, maybe even fear, but she recovered quickly, standing abruptly, her heels clicking against the floor. You're making a mistake, she said coolly. I smiled. Maybe, but at least it's mine to make. Isabel stormed out, her expensive heels striking the pavement with every furious step. I exhaled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Mom had been right. Success isn't always loud. Sometimes the quietest players make the big moves. I had work to do because this wasn't just about wealth, it was about impact. And now I had the resources to make it happen. My phone buzzed one last time. Isabel, this isn't over, Lexi. I glanced at the locked safe in my office where copies of every document were stored. I thought of my lawyer, already making arrangements to secure Mom's legacy. I smiled as I typed my response. You're right, it's just beginning. The morning after Isabel's world-shattering visit, I woke up to 14 missed calls and a flood of texts from relatives. Word had spread quickly. Isabel had made sure of that. Olivia, this is Aunt Beatrice. How could you do this to your sister? Your father would be devastated. Cousin Michael here. Let's talk business. I have some great investment opportunities. Hey, cuz, remember when we used to play together as kids? We should catch up. I sighed, muting my phone. Mom had always taught me the value of boundaries, and today I had no time for family drama. There was work to do. My first stop was Harrison and Associates, the law firm that had quietly managed Mom's empire for years. Unlike Abernathy, Dad's pompous corporate attorney, Veronica Harrison was sharp, modern, and unshakable. Right on schedule, Veronica said as I stepped into her office. Your mother predicted Isabel would try to contest this within days of finding out. I settled into the chair across from her desk. What's our next move? Veronica pulled out a thick folder, her lips curving slightly. Your mother left very specific instructions. She knew Isabel would try to challenge the holdings, likely claiming your mother was mentally unfit when she made these arrangements. I scoffed. That sounds exactly like Isabel. Which is why your mother built an airtight case. Veronica's eyes gleamed as she slid a stack of documents toward me. She spent years documenting everything. Business meetings, investment decisions, even recordings of conversations with financial advisors. It's all here. Your mother wasn't just running an empire, she was playing the long game. A slow, admiring smile spread across my face. Mom had been 10 steps ahead of everyone. And there's more, Veronica continued, pulling out another document. Your mother also left instructions regarding Morgan Communications. She suspected your father's company might try to obstruct some of her environmental initiatives, so she put certain measures in place. As Veronica laid out the details, I felt something settle in my chest, not just relief, but clarity. Mom hadn't just left me wealth, she had left me a strategy. Everything goes to your sister. My next stop was the University Laboratory of Dr. David Lee, one of the leading experts in ocean pollution prevention. According to Mom's files, she had been anonymously funding his work for years. The lab was nothing like Morgan Communications' polished glass-walled offices. There were no marble floors, no extravagant art pieces. Instead, it was lined with linoleum tiles, cluttered workbenches, and scientific posters. It felt more like home to me than Dad's world ever had. Dr. Lee's eyes widened when I introduced myself. Your mother was our anonymous benefactor? We've been trying to thank her for years. She believed in your work, I said, placing a contract on his desk. I want to increase the funding. It's time to elevate your research. As we discussed the expansion plans, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Isabel this time through email. You can't just walk away from family responsibility. Dad built this legacy for both of us. I stared at the words, contemplating Dad's legacy. Cutthroat business tactics, environmental neglect, manipulation. Then I thought about Mom's, sustainable innovation, careful planning, quiet strength. The choice was clear. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Isabel's Mercedes parked in front of my house. She was sitting on my porch steps, her perfect hair slightly tousled, her expression unreadable. As I approached, she stood up. We need to talk. Really talk, Lexi. I unlocked my door and let her follow me inside. This time, unlike yesterday, she didn't comment on my house or my furniture. I spoke to the board at Morgan Communications today, she began, pacing across my living room. Our stock dropped when news about Mom's sustainable technology holdings leaked. Investors are nervous. I leaned against the arm of my couch, crossing my arms. Sounds like your problem. Isabel stopped and spun to face me. It's an us problem, she snapped. This is our family's reputation we're talking about. Do you have any idea what people are saying? That Dad was so focused on grooming me for leadership, he missed what Mom was building right under his nose? They're calling him short-sighted, outdated. They're not wrong, I replied, unmoved. Isabel stopped pacing, her face flushed with frustration. How can you be so cold? This is Dad we're talking about. Yes, the same Dad who cut me out of his will because I refused to follow his blueprint. The same Dad who mocked my work, dismissed my choices. I held her gaze firmly. The same Dad who taught you to do the same. Isabel flinched. I never… But she trailed off, because we both knew the truth. She had laughed right alongside him when he belittled my research, when he mocked Mom's idealistic nonsense. Sit down, Jess, I said quietly. Let me show you something. I opened my laptop and pulled up a presentation I'd been working on. These are projections for the next 10 years. The impact of climate change on coastal businesses, environmental regulation trends, and sustainable technology market growth. I clicked through the slides, allowing the data to speak for itself. Dad's business model is dying. Mom saw it coming years ago. Isabel leaned in, her business mind whirring. Morgan Communications could adapt, she said slowly. With the right partnership. With your money, I corrected. With your investment, she countered. Think about it, Lexi. We could honor both our parents' legacies, merge the companies, modernize Dad's approach while you remain in control, I asked, raising an eyebrow. That's not happening, Jess. I'm done living in your shadow, trying to prove I'm worthy of the Morgan name. Her expression tightened. Is that what this is about? Revenge? I shut my laptop. No, it's about finally doing things my way. Mom gave me that freedom. Isabel didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. I don't know how to do this without you, Lexi. Dad always said we were stronger together. Dad said a lot of things. I held her gaze, but he was wrong about most of them. After she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto the back porch. The evening air smelled like autumn, crisp, fresh, full of change. I pulled out my phone and opened the email I'd been drafting all day. Dear Morgan Communications Board of Directors, my name is Olivia Morgan, and I'm writing to address the recent revelations about my mother's sustainable technology holdings. It was time to make my own moves. Isabel was right about one thing. This was just the beginning. The next morning, another storm arrived in the form of Uncle Marcus, Dad's younger brother, a Morgan Communications board member. He showed up unannounced at my door. Your father would be turning in his grave, he declared, skipping a greeting, letting Morgan Communications' stock price take a hit like this. I let him rant, barely listening. He'd always been Dad's echo, rolling his eyes at my tree-hugger nonsense at family dinners. Are you finished? I asked when he finally paused for breath. Olivia, be reasonable, he said, switching tactics. The family name is exactly what I'm protecting. I folded my arms. While you and Dad clung to outdated business practices, Mom was building something sustainable, something future-proof. His face reddened. Your mother didn't understand business. She was just the woman who outmaneuvered all of you, I offered. The one who built $1 billion empire while you weren't paying attention. His mouth pressed into a hard line. You're making a mistake. No, I said evenly. I'm fixing yours. He left in a fury, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I had a feeling future family gatherings were going to be very interesting, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. I had a meeting with a team of environmental scientists struggling to fund their coral reef restoration project. Thanks to Mom, I could help. As I drove, I thought about how much had changed in just a few days. Mom's gift wasn't just financial freedom, it was the power to make a real difference. My phone buzzed. Another text from Isabel. Board meeting tomorrow. Last chance to work together on this. I smiled, thinking of the email I'd sent last night. The plan's already in motion. Good luck with the meeting. I have other commitments. The morning of Morgan Communications board meeting arrived with unexpected news. Their stock had plunged another 15% in pre-market trading. My phone buzzed with a headline from the Wall Street Journal. Morgan Communications faces investor exodus amid sustainability crisis. I was in my home office reviewing research proposals when Isabel burst in, still in her boardroom attire. Her perfectly tailored suit did nothing to hide the fury in her eyes. What did you do? She demanded, slamming a stack of papers onto my desk. Half our major investors are threatening to pull out. See, hey. I glanced at the printouts. emails from Morgan Communications' largest institutional investors, concerns over environmental impact, questions about outdated business practices, warnings about market instability. I leaned back in my chair. Funny how transparency works, isn't it? Isabel's voice sharpened. Transparency? You sent environmental impact reports to our investors. Reports that your research helped compile, not mine, I corrected. Those reports came from independent environmental agencies. I just made sure the right people saw them. Isabel dropped into a chair, her composure fracturing. The board is in panic mode. They're talking about emergency measures, maybe even selling off divisions just to stay afloat. I nodded. They should be worried. Mom's companies are announcing major sustainability initiatives tomorrow. Breakthrough tech that makes Morgan Communications look like a fossil. Isabel exhaled sharply. You're destroying everything Dad built. I met her gaze. No, Jess. Dad destroyed it himself by refusing to adapt. Mom warned him for years about sustainability and modernization. He ignored her. Isabel's fingers tightened into fists. And this is your revenge? This is business. My voice was cold, just like Dad's had always been. Isn't that what he taught us? The market evolves, companies adapt, or they die. Before Isabel could reply, my phone rang. Veronica Harrison, the voice on the other end said. Turn on CNBC. Something's happening. I switched on the TV. Isabel turned, her face draining of color as the breaking news ticker scrolled across the screen. Morgan Communications Board calls emergency session. CEO position under review. Isabel's breath hitched. They can't do this. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm Dad's chosen successor. But they could and they were. The news anchor was already dissecting the board's decision. How Isabel had failed to anticipate market shifts. How Morgan Communications was hemorrhaging investors. How the company had fallen behind on sustainability. Veronica's voice cut through the moment. The board is receiving another packet of documents. Your mother's reports detailing every mistake Morgan Communications made and exactly how they could have adapted. Isabel turned back to me, realization dawning. You planned this. I shook my head. Wrong again, Jess. I don't want Dad's company, but I do want the world to see why his way of doing business doesn't work anymore. My phone buzzed again, an email from Dr. Chen. His team had breakthrough results on the ocean cleanup project. You should get back to your meeting, I said, standing. Sounds like they have a lot to discuss. Isabel rose slowly, squaring her shoulders. This isn't over, Olivia. I gave her an annoying smile. Actually, it is. Mom made sure of that. That afternoon, I drove to the university to meet Dr. Chen and his team. The lab was buzzing with excitement. This could revolutionize ocean cleanup efforts, Dr. Chen explained, showing me the data. And with the funding you've provided, we can scale it globally. I thought about Dad, his disdain for environmental efforts, his obsession with short-term profits over long-term impact. Mom had seen a different future. Now, I was the one making it a reality. That evening, Veronica called again. The board meeting just ended, she said. Isabel's been removed as CEO. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of it settle. They're bringing in an interim leader while they reassess the company's direction. I already knew Isabel wouldn't take it well. How's she handling it? Veronica hesitated. She's threatening legal action, claiming family rights to the position. Let her, I said. The shareholders won't support her, not after today. Veronica sighed. There's more. Some board members are suggesting a merger with your mother's companies. They think it's the only way to save Morgan Communications. I almost laughed. Dad's company begging for salvation from the very environmental initiatives he had once mocked. Not interested. Veronica's response was unsurprising. I figured you'd say that. Soon after hanging up, I opened my laptop, reviewing the final details for tomorrow's press conference. Mom's legacy wasn't just alive, it was thriving, just as she had envisioned. My phone buzzed again. Uncle Marcus. His message was short but pointed. The family name, Olivia. Think about what you're doing to the family name. I paused, thinking about Mom quietly building something meaningful, while Dad and Isabel chased profits and power. I thought of all the years I'd been dismissed, belittled, made to feel like I didn't belong. I glanced at Uncle Marcus's text once more. The family name, Olivia. Think about what you're doing to the family name. I exhaled slowly, my fingers hovering over the keyboard before I typed my response. I am thinking about the family name. I'm giving it a future. Later that night, as I reviewed my speech for the press conference, I found an old photo album tucked away in my desk drawer. The first photo, Mom at my college graduation, beaming with pride as I accepted my marine biology degree. Dad and Isabel hadn't been there. They had a business meeting. Another photo, Mom kneeling in her garden, teaching me about ecosystems when I was little. She had always nurtured my curiosity, encouraged my drive to protect the environment, even when the rest of the family laughed at it. And now I understood. She had been playing the long game all along, preparing me for this very moment. My phone buzzed again, another news alert. Morgan Communications stock hits 5-year low amid leadership crisis. I closed the article and opened my email instead. Dr. Chin's final presentation was waiting for my review. Tomorrow, we would introduce the world to a new way of doing business, one that prioritized sustainability over greed, innovation over stagnation. Isabel might still be clinging to Dad's company, but I had something better. Mom's vision for the future and the power to make it real. This wasn't just the next chapter of my life, it was the next chapter of the Morgan legacy. And this time, it would be written on my terms. Another text interrupted my thoughts. Isabel. They're destroying everything Dad built. Please, Lexi, help me fix this. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Some things aren't meant to be fixed, Jess. They're meant to be transformed. 1 year after Mom's revelations had turned everything upside down, I stood at a podium overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Behind me, the first of our large-scale ocean cleanup systems was launching a dream I'd carried since graduate school, now realized through Mom's legacy. I took a deep breath to steady myself before addressing the crowd of reporters, scientists, and investors gathered before me. Today isn't just an environmental victory, it's proof that business and responsibility aren't opposing forces. Success isn't measured by quarterly profits alone, but by the legacy we leave for future generations. As I scanned the audience, my eyes locked on Isabel. She sat in the back row, quieter than I'd ever seen her, less polished, more human. Morgan Communications had undergone a complete transformation over the past year, but not in the way Isabel had once envisioned. After her removal as CEO, the board had made the unthinkable decision to dismantle the company. Its divisions had been sold off to organizations with stronger environmental ethics. The Morgan name, once synonymous with corporate power, had taken on an entirely new meaning. When my speech ended and the cleanup system hummed to life, Isabel approached the podium. "Nice speech," she said, her voice softer, stripped of its usual edge. Mom would have been proud. I studied her carefully. No resentment, no defensiveness. "How are you, Jess? Really?" She hesitated, then offered a small, wry smile. "Surviving. It's different not being Isabel Morgan, CEO, but maybe that's not entirely bad." We walked along the shoreline, watching the cleanup system in action. The technology was already showing promising results in early trials. After a long silence, Isabel spoke. "You know what I realized? I spent so many years trying to be exactly what Dad wanted that I never stopped to think about what I wanted." I turned to her. "And what do you want?" She exhaled slowly, watching the waves. "I've been volunteering at a marine education center, teaching kids about ocean conservation. It's kind of amazing seeing their faces light up when they understand something new." A genuine smile broke across my face. "Mom would have loved that." "Yeah," Isabel murmured. "She would have." Later that afternoon, Veronica Harrison walked into my office, carrying the latest reports. My mom's companies had tripled in value, but more importantly, our environmental initiatives were making an immeasurable impact. "There's something else," Veronica said, sliding an envelope onto my desk. "We found this among your mother's old files. She left instructions for it to be delivered today." I unfolded the letter, my breath catching as I saw Mom's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Olivia, If you're reading this, a year has passed since you learned about your inheritance. I hope you've used this time wisely, and from what I've arranged to be monitored, I believe you have. But there's one last thing I need you to understand. Your sister, despite everything, is still your sister. Isabel was just as much a victim of your father's rigid worldview as you were. She simply coped differently. Now that his influence is gone, she might surprise you. I've left instructions with Veronica for a separate fund, one dedicated to environmental education initiatives. If Isabel has shown any sign of change, any willingness to see the world differently, I want you to offer her the chance to manage it. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't in defeating our enemies, but in helping them become better people. I love you, Mom. I sat back in my chair, the weight of Mom's final lesson settling over me. Even now, she was teaching me not about strategy or business, but about grace, wisdom, and the art of forgiveness. That evening, I invited Isabel over for dinner. As we sat on the back porch, the crisp autumn air swirling around us, I told her about the letter and the education fund. You don't have to decide right away, I said, choosing my words carefully. But if you're serious about marine education... See, Isabel cut me off. Why would you trust me with this? After everything? I thought about Mom's words, her belief in second chances. Because sometimes, people deserve a chance to rewrite their story. Isabel swallowed, her eyes welling with unexpected tears. I was horrible to you for years. I helped Dad tear you down because it made me feel more secure in my place in his world. I know, I said simply, but that's not who you have to be anymore. Over the next few months, Isabel threw herself into the work with a determination I hadn't seen from her before. She approached building the education programs with the same intensity she once reserved for corporate takeovers. At first, it felt strange to work together instead of against each other, but Mom had been right. People could change if given the chance. The final piece clicked into place on what would have been Mom's birthday. Isabel and I stood in her garden, the same one I had carefully maintained all these years. Isabel ran her fingers over a rose bush. Mom used to try to get me interested in gardening when we were kids. She'd talk about ecosystems and balance in nature. I never listened. I was too focused on memorizing Dad's business lessons. I smiled. She never gave up on us, not for a moment. Isabel turned to face me, her expression serious. I'm sorry, Lexi, for everything. I was so focused on being Dad's daughter that I forgot how to be Mom's too. For the first time in years, I pulled my sister into a hug. Mom knew what she was doing, I whispered. She saved both of us, just in different ways. That night, I sat in my office reviewing the latest reports from our ocean cleanup projects. On my wall hung 2 photos, one of Mom in her garden, kneeling in the dirt, teaching me about nature, and another of Isabel, teaching a group of children about marine conservation, her face glowing with genuine joy. Mom's legacy wasn't just about money or companies, it was about transformation of the environment, our family, and ourselves. She had played the longest game of all, ensuring not just financial success, but the possibility of healing and growth. My phone buzzed. A text from Isabel. Kids asked about adding a hands-on marine biology program. Thought you might want to help design it. I smiled, remembering Mom's final letter. Count me in, I replied. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't about winning or losing, it's about changing the game entirely. Mom had understood that all along, and now, finally, so did we. What do you do when you realize that, despite all the years of feeling inferior, your true inheritance isn't just about money, it's about legacy, change, and the power to make a difference? For Olivia, this realization hit when she learned that her mother had quietly built a massive empire, far surpassing the wealth her father had amassed. While Dad had dismissed Olivia's dreams and favored Isabel, his chosen successor, Olivia's mother had been preparing her for something far greater, something that would change the course of not just her life, but the future of the world. The moment Olivia stood in front of Isabel, revealing the truth of their mother's sustainable investments, was a turning point. Isabel, once the golden child, was forced to face the fact that her world was built on outdated ideals, while Olivia's world was just beginning to bloom with purpose. And though Isabel initially fought to maintain control, Olivia stood firm in her vision. Her path was her own. This wasn't about revenge. It was about building something lasting, something that would shape the future. And as Isabel slowly came to understand, it wasn't too late for her to change. The sisterhood that had been fractured by years of competition started to heal as they worked together to honor their mother's true legacy. So, what do you think? Was Olivia right to take control of her future, or do you think she should have tried to find a way to work with Isabel? Have you ever had to confront a situation where the path you were expected to follow didn't align with your true calling? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
The clinking of silverware against plates echoed through the dining room as our family gathered for another routine Sunday dinner. My husband, Caleb, chatted amiably with my niece, Lila, who had been staying with us for the weekend. The aroma of my famous pot roast filled the air, but little did I know that the evening's events would leave a far more pungent taste. "This is delicious, Aunt Meredith," Lila said, taking another bite. "It's been so long since I've had a home-cooked meal like this." "Thank you, sweetie," I replied with a smile, savoring the moment of normalcy amidst the chaos that was about to unfold. Caleb nodded in agreement, his mouth full. "Your aunt's a fantastic cook. You should come over more often." Lila's gaze dropped, her expression turning somber. "I'm not sure if that's such a good idea." An uneasy silence settled over the table. Caleb and I exchanged a puzzled glance, sensing the shift in Lila's demeanor. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, reaching across the table to touch her hand. Lila's eyes welled up with tears, and she let out a shuddering breath. "I can't keep this a secret anymore. Dad, he's been doing something illegal at work." The words hung heavy in the air, like a suffocating fog. Caleb's brow furrowed, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. "What do you mean, illegal?" he probed gently. Lila's trembling hands gripped the table's edge. "He's been embezzling money from the company. I overheard him talking about it on the phone with someone." My heart sank and a wave of nausea washed over me. My own brother Derek, stealing from the very company that employed us both? It seemed too outrageous to be true, and yet Lila's distress left little room for doubt. "Are you sure about this, Lila?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "I wouldn't lie about something like this, Aunt Meredith. He's been acting strange for months, always stressed and spending money like it's going out of style. I didn't want to believe it at first, but the evidence is staring us right in the face." Caleb reached across the table, clasping Lila's hand in a reassuring gesture. "We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise. Your dad's going to have to answer for his actions, but we'll make sure you and your mom are taken care of." As the gravity of the situation sank in, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal. Derek was my own flesh and blood, someone I had trusted implicitly. Now, his actions threatened to tear our family apart, and I found myself caught in the crosshairs of a battle I never saw coming. The pot roast lay untouched, its once tantalizing aroma now a bitter reminder of the harsh reality that had invaded our home. As Layla's confession echoed in my mind, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I could barely sleep that night, Lila's revelation replaying in my mind like a broken record. How could Derek, my own brother, be capable of such deceit? As morning light crept through the curtains, I resolved to confront him and get to the bottom of this mess. Caleb insisted on coming with me, his jaw set in a grim line. He's not going to like what we have to say, but he needs to face the consequences of his actions. We arrived at Derek's upscale suburban home, the extravagance of it all now glaringly conspicuous. Caleb rang the doorbell, and after a few moments Derek answered, his face falling when he saw us. "Meredith? Caleb, what brings you two here so early?" he asked, eyes darting between us suspiciously. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "We need to talk, Derek. It's about the company." His expression hardened and he stepped back, ushering us inside. "What about it?" "Don't play dumb, Derek," Caleb interjected, his tone stern. "Lila told us everything, the embezzlement, the illegal activities. It all ends now." Derek's face contorted with rage, and he slammed his fist against the wall. "That little brat! How dare she stick her nose where it doesn't belong?" "She's your daughter, Derek," I cried, appalled by his callous reaction. How could you put your own family at risk like this? He whirled towards me, his eyes wild. Don't you dare lecture me about family, Meredith. You have no idea what I've had to do to provide for all of you. By stealing? By breaking the law? Caleb's voice boomed, his composure fraying. You've not only betrayed your company, but also your own flesh and blood. Derek let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Says the man who made a career out of locking people up. You're no better than I am, Caleb. The tension in the room was palpable, like a coiled spring ready to snap. I placed a hand on Caleb's arm, silently pleading with him to remain calm. We're not here to fight, Derek, I said, my voice trembling. We just want the truth. Derek's shoulders sagged, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of remorse in his eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. Fine, you want the truth? He spat. I did what I had to do to keep this family afloat. After the divorce, I was drowning in debt, and the company was my only lifeline. You think they would have cared if I went under? If Lila and her mother ended up on the streets? His words hung in the air, a twisted justification for his crimes. Caleb shook his head, his jaw clenched. That doesn't make it right, Derek. You've broken the law, and there will be consequences. Derek's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper. You're not going to do anything, Caleb. Not if you know what's good for you and your precious little family. The veiled threat hung heavy between us, and I felt a chill run down my spine. In that moment, I realized that the brother I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a man consumed by greed and desperation. As we left Derek's house, the weight of his actions bearing down on us, I couldn't help but wonder if we had just opened Pandora's box, and what horrors might lie ahead. Derek's thinly veiled threat hung over us like a dark cloud as we left his house. Caleb's jaw was set in a grim line, his knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. That arrogant son of a... he muttered under his breath, his words trailing off into a frustrated sigh. I placed a hand on his arm, trying to calm him. Caleb, what are we going to do? He's not going to just roll over and admit his guilt. Caleb's eyes met mine, a steely determination burning within them. Then we'll make him. I'm not going to let that scumbag get away with what he's done. In that moment, I saw a glimpse of the tenacious prosecutor Caleb had once been, a man who wouldn't rest until justice was served. Where do we start? I asked, my voice wavering slightly. We start by gathering evidence, Caleb replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. Anything we can find that proves Derek's involvement in this embezzlement scheme. The days that followed were a whirlwind of covert investigation. Caleb pored over financial records, cross-referencing dates and transactions, building an ironclad case against my brother. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, as if I were betraying my own flesh and blood. I know this is hard for you, Meredith, Caleb said one evening, his voice softer than usual. But Derek made his choices, and now he has to face the consequences. I nodded, fighting back tears. It's just... he's my brother, Caleb. How could he do something like this? Caleb reached across the table, taking my hand in his. Greed can make even the most trusted people do terrible things, but we can't let that blind us to the truth. As the evidence mounted, a clearer picture began to emerge. Derek had been systematically siphoning funds from the company for years, using his position to cover his tracks. But it wasn't just the money. He had also been manipulating and threatening those closest to him, including his estranged wife, Elise, and their daughter, Lila. That bastard, Caleb growled, slamming his fist on the table as we reviewed the latest findings. He's been holding Elise and Lila hostage this whole time, using their fear and his control over their finances to keep them quiet. I felt sick to my stomach, the depth of Derek's depravity hitting me like a ton of bricks. This was no longer just about embezzlement. It was about protecting my family from a man who had descended into a pit of moral corruption. Caleb's eyes met mine, his gaze unwavering. We have to stop him, Meredith, no matter what it takes. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. Derek had made his choices, and now it was up to us to make ours, to stand up against his wickedness and bring him to justice, no matter the cost. As the days wore on, the weight of Derek's crimes began to take its toll. At work, whispers and sideways glances followed me through the corridors. my connection to the unfolding scandal like a scarlet letter. "How could you not have known, Meredith?" Janet, a coworker, asked one day, her voice dripping with judgment. I clenched my fists, biting back the urge to lash out. My brother's actions are his own. I had no idea he was capable of such deceit. Janet shook her head, her lips pursed. "Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?" The comment stung, and I fought back tears as I retreated to my office, slamming the door behind me. How dare she insinuate that I was somehow complicit in Derek's crimes? The ringing of my phone startled me, and I snatched it up, struggling to compose myself. "Hello? Aunt Meredith?" It was Lila, her voice trembling. "I need your help." My heart sank, and a wave of dread washed over me. "What's wrong, honey?" "It's Dad," she choked out between sobs. "He found out I told you and Uncle Caleb everything. He's furious, and he's threatening to cut me off completely." I could feel the anger bubbling within me, a protective instinct kicking in. "That bastard," I growled. "Don't worry, Lila. We'll take care of this." Hanging up, I wasted no time in calling Caleb, relaying the situation with urgency. His voice was grim, but resolute. "I'll be right there. We're not letting him get away with this anymore." Within the hour, Caleb was at my office, his expression thunderous. He pulled me into a fierce embrace, and I could feel the tension radiating off him. "That son of a bitch has gone too far," he seethed. "Threatening his own daughter like that, it's unforgivable." I nodded, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. "We have to stop him, Caleb, before he hurts Lila or anyone else." The drive to Derek's house was a blur, my mind racing with a million different scenarios. What would we find when we got there? Would Derek be reasonable, or would his desperation drive him to new lows? The moment we stepped onto his doorstep, the air was thick with hostility. Derek flung open the door, his face contorted with rage. "What do you two want now?" he spat, his eyes darting between us. Caleb stepped forward, his stance unwavering. "We're here to put an end to your little charade, Derek. The threats, the manipulation, it all stops now." Derek's laughter was like nails on a chalkboard. "Or what? You'll throw me in jail? You don't have the guts, Caleb." In a flash, Caleb had Derek pinned against the wall, his forearm pressed against his throat. "Don't test me, Derek. I won't let you hurt my family anymore." The venom in Caleb's voice sent a chill down my spine, but I knew he was right. We had reached our breaking point, and there was no turning back. As Derek struggled against Caleb's grip, his eyes met mine, and in that moment I saw the true depth of his depravity. This was no longer the brother I had known and loved. This was a monster, consumed by greed and willing to crush anyone who stood in his way. The die was cast, and the battle lines were drawn. It was us against Derek, a fight for survival and redemption. And as I watched the two men grapple, I knew that no matter the outcome, our lives would never be the same again. The confrontation with Derek had been a stark wake-up call, a reminder that we were dealing with a man who had fully embraced his own depravity. As Caleb and I regrouped, the weight of the task before us seemed more daunting than ever. "We can't take him on alone," Caleb said, his brow furrowed in thought. "He's too desperate, too willing to cross any line to protect himself." I nodded, my mind already racing with possibilities. "What about Elise? She's been living under his thumb for years. She might be willing to help us bring him down." Caleb's eyes lit up, a glimmer of hope flickering in their depths. "That's brilliant, Meredith. If we can get her on our side, it'll be a major blow to Derek's defenses." Reaching out to Elise was a delicate process, shrouded in secrecy to protect her from Derek's wrath. But when we finally met, the pain and resentment in her eyes were palpable. "That bastard has made my life a living hell," she spat, her knuckles white from gripping the table. "He's threatened me, controlled every aspect of my existence, all to keep me quiet about his little schemes." Caleb leaned forward, his voice low and reassuring. "Not anymore, Elise. We're going to stop him, but we need your help." The fire in Elise's eyes was unmistakable, a burning desire for justice that had been simmering for far too long. "Whatever it takes," she said firmly. "I'm done living in fear." With Elise on board, the pieces began to fall into place. Caleb's contacts from his days as a prosecutor proved invaluable as we slowly built a network of allies, disgruntled employees, forensic accountants, anyone who could help us unravel the tangled web of Derek's crimes. But as our efforts intensified, so did Derek's desperation. Lila reported increasingly erratic behavior, outbursts of rage, and thinly veiled threats. It was clear that he was starting to sense the noose tightening around him. "We have to be careful," Caleb warned during one of our clandestine meetings. "Derek's like a caged animal right now, and there's no telling how far he'll go to protect himself." The tension was palpable, a constant undercurrent of danger lurking beneath the surface. But we were resolved, united in our determination to bring Derek's reign of terror to an end. Late one night, as I sat poring over financial records, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was one of Caleb's contacts, his voice laced with urgency. "We've got him," the man said breathlessly. "Ironclad evidence of fraud, money laundering, the whole 9 yards. It's time to make our move." I felt a rush of adrenaline, the moment we'd been working towards finally within reach. Quickly, I relayed the news to Caleb and our team, setting the wheels in motion for the final confrontation. As I looked around the room at the determined faces of our allies, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and gratitude. We had started this journey alone, but now we were a force to be reckoned with, a band of unlikely heroes united against a common enemy. Derek's downfall was imminent, and as we prepared for the final showdown, I knew that no matter the outcome, we had already won a victory. We had refused to cower in fear, and we had built a network of allies strong enough to take on even the most formidable foe. The stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise on the ultimate act of reckoning. Derek's reign of terror was coming to an end, and we were ready to face him head-on, armed with the truth and a resolve that could not be broken. The day of reckoning had arrived, and the air was thick with tension as we gathered in the conference room at Caleb's law firm. Elise sat beside me, her hands trembling slightly, while Lila fidgeted nervously in her chair. The weight of what was about to transpire hung heavy over us all. Caleb entered the room, a grim expression etched onto his face. "It's time," he said, his voice low and resolute. We followed him down the corridor, our footsteps echoing off the walls like a funeral march. As we approached the boardroom, the muffled sounds of raised voices filtered through the doors. Derek was already inside, surrounded by members of the company's board. Caleb paused, turning to face us. "Remember, no matter what happens in there, we stay calm and focused. This is our chance to bring Derek's reign of terror to an end, once and for all." With a deep breath, he pushed open the doors, and we filed into the room. Derek's eyes widened in surprise, his gaze flickering between us and the board members. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice dripping with disdain. One of the board members, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Whitmore, fixed him with a steely glare. "We've been made aware of some rather disturbing allegations against you, Mr. Reynolds. Allegations of embezzlement, fraud, and misconduct." Derek scoffed, his lips curling into a sneer. "Preposterous. These are nothing more than baseless accusations from disgruntled employees and family members with personal vendettas." Caleb stepped forward, a thick file clutched in his hand. "I'm afraid the evidence speaks for itself, Derek. Bank records, financial statements, eyewitness accounts. It all points to a systematic and calculated effort to siphon funds from this company for your own personal gain." The color drained from Derek's face as Caleb began presenting the damning evidence, each document and testimony like a nail in the coffin of his deceit. "You've been living a lie, Derek," Caleb said, his voice ringing out in the silent room. "And not just with this company, but with your own family as well." Elise rose to her feet, her eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and resolve. "He's right. For years, Derek has manipulated and threatened me, using our finances as a weapon to keep me silent about his misdeeds." Lila followed suit, her voice trembling but resolute. "He's even turned on me, his own daughter, when I discovered the truth about his crimes." Derek's eyes darted around the room, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before our eyes. "This is absurd," he sputtered, his face flushed with rage. "You have no proof, no concrete evidence." But Caleb was ready, producing a final damning piece of evidence. A recorded phone conversation between Derek and one of his co-conspirators, detailing the intricate web of fraud and money laundering. As the recording played, the silence in the room was deafening, a palpable sense of shock and disbelief hanging in the air. When the final words faded, Derek slumped back in his chair, defeated. The weight of his crimes had finally caught up to him, and there was nowhere left to run. Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat, her gaze fixed on Derek with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented here today, the board has no choice but to terminate your employment with this company, effective immediately. Derek's head snapped up, his eyes wild and desperate. You can't do this. I built this company from the ground up. But his protests fell on deaf ears as the board members turned their backs on him, one by one. In that moment, I saw the true depth of Derek's fall. A once powerful man reduced to a pathetic, sniveling mess, his lies and betrayals laid bare for all to see. As security escorted him from the building, Caleb placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. It's over, Meredith, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Justice has been served. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders, but the victory was bittersweet. Derek's downfall had come at a great personal cost, tearing our family apart and exposing the darkest corners of human greed and depravity. But as I looked around at the faces of those who had stood by us, Elise, Lila, our allies in the shadows, I knew that we had emerged from this ordeal stronger, united by a shared commitment to truth and accountability. The path ahead would be long and difficult, but in that moment, I knew that we had taken the first steps towards redemption, towards healing the wounds that Derek had inflicted upon us all. The aftermath of Derek's downfall was a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media scrutiny. As the details of his crimes made headlines, the public outrage was palpable, a collective sense of betrayal and disbelief that someone in such a position of power could stoop to such depravity. Through it all, Caleb stood by my side, a steadfast pillar of strength and unwavering determination. We're not done yet, he would remind me, his jaw set in a grim line. Derek needs to face the full consequences of his actions, and face them he did. The criminal charges came swiftly, a laundry list of offenses that would make even the most hardened criminal wince: fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and more. As the court proceedings unfolded, the extent of Derek's deception was laid bare, each revelation more shocking than the last. Elise took the stand, her testimony detailing the years of emotional and financial abuse she had endured at Derek's hands. He made me feel like a prisoner in my own life, she said, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. Always dangling the threat of financial ruin over my head, using our daughter as leverage to keep me in line. Lila's testimony was equally damning, painting a picture of a man so consumed by greed and ambition that he was willing to sacrifice his own family on the altar of his desires. As the evidence mounted, Derek's arrogance slowly crumbled, his once boastful demeanor replaced by a sullen, defeated hunch. When the guilty verdict was finally read, a hush fell over the courtroom, the weight of the moment almost palpable. Derek Reynolds, you have been found guilty on all counts, the judge intoned, his voice ringing out like a death knell. In light of the severity of your crimes and the devastating impact they have had on countless lives, I hereby sentence you to 25 years in a federal penitentiary. The words hung in the air, a collective sigh of relief and vindication rippling through the room. Derek's face was ashen, his eyes vacant, as the reality of his situation finally set in. In the days that followed, Caleb worked tirelessly to ensure that Elise and Lila were provided for, securing a substantial divorce settlement and financial compensation for the years of anguish they had endured. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but an important one nonetheless. As for me, the weight of Derek's betrayal still hung heavy on my heart. He was my brother, my own flesh and blood, and yet he had shown no hesitation in sacrificing everything: our family, our bond, our trust, in pursuit of his own selfish desires. You did the right thing, Meredith, Caleb would remind me, his arms wrapped around me in a comforting embrace. Derek made his choices, and now he's facing the consequences. And slowly, gradually, I began to heal. The wounds inflicted by Derek's actions were deep, but with the love and support of Caleb, Elise, and Lila, I found the strength to move forward, to reclaim the pieces of my life that had been shattered. It was during one of our regular family dinners, a ritual we had re-established in the wake of Derek's downfall, that I finally found a sense of closure. As we gathered around the table, the laughter and warmth a stark contrast to the darkness we had endured. I looked around at the faces of those I loved most. Elise, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of freedom and empowerment. Lila, her smile radiant and unencumbered by the weight of her father's sins. And Caleb, my rock, my unwavering source of strength and love. In that moment, I realized that while Derek had tried to tear us apart, he had ultimately failed. Our bonds had been tested, but they had emerged stronger than ever, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by our collective resolve. As I raised my glass, a sense of gratitude washed over me. To family, I said, my voice thick with emotion, and to the journey that has brought us here, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The echoes of agreement filled the room, a testament to the power of love and perseverance in the face of even the darkest of trials. Derek's fate was sealed, his legacy one of greed and betrayal. But for us, a new chapter was unfolding, one filled with hope, redemption, and the promise of brighter days ahead. The days leading up to Derek's sentencing were a whirlwind of emotions. Caleb and I had spent countless hours preparing our victim impact statements, poring over every detail, every heartache Derek had inflicted upon us. "This is our chance to have our voices heard," Caleb said, his brow furrowed in concentration, "to make sure Derek understands the true gravity of his actions." When the day finally arrived, the courtroom was packed, a sea of faces eager to witness the final act of reckoning. Derek was led in, his once imposing figure now diminished, his eyes downcast and hollow. As I took the stand, my hands trembled, but my voice was steady, fueled by a deep well of resolve. "Derek Reynolds was once my brother, my own flesh and blood," I began, my words ringing out in the hushed courtroom. "But the man who sits before us today is a stranger, a shell of the person I once knew and loved." I recounted the pain, the betrayal, the utter devastation Derek's actions had wrought upon our family, how his greed had nearly torn us apart, leaving scars that may never fully heal. "You had everything, Derek," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "A loving family, a successful career, a life that so many would envy. And yet, it wasn't enough. Your insatiable greed drove you to sacrifice it all, to burn every bridge and crush anyone who stood in your way." Derek's eyes remained fixed on the floor, his jaw clenched, but I could see the flicker of shame in his expression. When it was Caleb's turn, he did not hold back, his words lashing out like whips against Derek's battered ego. "You are a coward, Derek Reynolds," Caleb said, his voice dripping with disdain. "A selfish, manipulative coward who thought he could bend the world to his will, consequences be damned." He recounted the threats, the emotional and financial abuse Derek had inflicted upon Elise and Lila, his own daughter. "What kind of man does that?" Caleb thundered. "What kind of soulless monster preys upon his own family for personal gain?" Derek flinched, his hands balling into fists, but he remained silent, his head bowed in silent submission. As the judge handed down Derek's sentence, 25 years with no possibility of parole, a sense of finality settled over the courtroom. It was done. The monster had been caged, and justice had been served. In the weeks that followed, a strange sense of calm descended upon our lives. The storm had passed, leaving us battered but ultimately stronger for having weathered it together. Elise and Lila found solace in their newfound freedom, slowly rebuilding their lives from the ashes of Derek's destruction. Lila, in particular, blossomed, her smile radiant and unencumbered by the weight of her father's sins. "It's like a weight has been lifted," she confided in me one day, her eyes shining with hope. "I can finally breathe again, without the constant fear of his wrath hanging over me." As for Caleb and me, our bond had been forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by our shared commitment to truth and justice. We had faced the darkness head-on and emerged on the other side, battered but unbroken. It was during one of our regular family dinners that I truly felt the weight of what we had endured and what we had overcome. As we gathered around the table, the laughter and warmth a stark contrast to the darkness we had faced, I looked around at the faces of those I loved most. Elise, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of freedom and empowerment. Lila, her smile radiant and unencumbered by the weight of her father's sins. And Caleb, my rock, my unwavering source of strength and love. In that moment I realized that while Derek had tried to tear us apart, he had ultimately failed. Our bonds had been tested, but they had emerged stronger than ever, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by our collective resolve. As I raised my glass, a sense of gratitude washed over me. To family, I said, my voice thick with emotion, and to the journey that has brought us here, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The echoes of agreement filled the room, a testament to the power of love and perseverance in the face of even the darkest of trials. Derek's fate was sealed, his legacy one of greed and betrayal. But for us, a new chapter was unfolding, one filled with hope, redemption, and the promise of brighter days ahead. Pregnant again? How utterly disappointing. Marla's words sliced through the tense silence like a butcher's knife. My stomach dropped as I slowly looked up from my plate at my mother-in-law's sneering face. Evan shifted uncomfortably beside me, but stayed silent as usual. Marla continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "Another daughter, I assume? When are you going to give my son the heir he deserves?" I felt the blood drain from my face as the weight of her words slammed into me. This was supposed to be a joyful celebration dinner for my pregnancy, but Marla had once again managed to turn it into a humiliation. "Mother, please," Evan finally muttered, but she waved him off dismissively. "Don't mother me. You're just as frustratingly submissive as your father was. If you don't control your wife, she'll keep popping out these disappointing female placeholders." Tears stung my eyes as I finally found my voice. "Zoe is not a placeholder. She's our beloved daughter, and this pregnancy is still early. We don't know the sex yet." "Oh, spare me." Marla rolled her eyes. "With your atrocious track record, it's clearly another girl. You're a broodmare failure." The venom in her tone shook me to my core. Evan's head hung low, crushed by his mother's verbal lashing. Hurt and rage burned inside me, but I knew defending myself was futile against this woman's cruelty. I need some air," I managed to choke out, pushing back from the table. I had to escape before breaking down completely. Marla scoffed as I rushed away. "Running away again, are we?" Typical. I hurried out to the back patio, gulping in the cool night air as burning tears streaked my cheeks. How could she be so hateful and demeaning toward me? Footsteps approached, and I tensed, steeling myself for another barrage of insults. But it was Evan, his face etched with sadness and apologetic. "Lena, I'm so sorry, she was completely out of line back there," he said softly, taking my hand. "You know how important you and the kids are to me. Don't listen to her vitriol." I pulled my hand away, suddenly angry at his passivity. "But I did listen, Evan. For 8 years, I've listened to her constant put-downs and cruelty toward me, toward Zoe. When are you finally going to stand up to your mother?" Evan's eyes widened, then quickly averted. You know how she is. She'll never change," he mumbled weakly. I felt something inside me harden at his words. For the first time, I truly saw Evan's inability, or unwillingness, to protect me from his mother's abuse. In that moment, the illusion of our marriage began cracking before my eyes. As I looked into my husband's beaten, submissive stance, I realized with sinking dread that this pattern would never end. Marla's iron grip over him was unbreakable, and I was the perpetual target for her destructive need to dominate. Warily, I turned and headed back inside, leaving Evan standing alone with his spineless excuses. I sensed this was the beginning of an inescapable downward spiral that would alter my family forever. If only I knew then just how devastating the consequences would be. The tension hung thick in the air as Marla smoothed her silk blouse, a self-satisfied smirk playing across her lips. "Lena, dear, I have some news that may shake things up a bit." I eyed her warily from across the kitchen counter. "What are you talking about?" "Well, you know how concerned I've been about securing a legitimate heir for my son," she began in a mock-sympathetic tone. "A daughter is lovely, but it simply won't do for carrying on the family legacy." Rage simmered within me, but I bit my tongue. After the disastrous dinner weeks ago, I knew any protest would be futile against this woman's twisted agenda. Marla continued, "So, I took matters into my own hands to help solve this delicate issue. I introduced Evan to a wonderful young lady, Sienna. She's fertile, devoted, and more than capable of providing him with the son he deserves." The words hung in the air like a bad dream. But Marla's vindictive stare told me this was no nightmare. It was disgustingly real. You brought another woman into our marriage to have a baby with my husband? I sputtered, struggling to process this depths of her depravity. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she scoffed. I'm doing what's best for my son's future. You've proven quite incapable in that regard. The casual cruelty of her words struck me like physical blows. How could anyone be so utterly lacking in human empathy? You cruel, manipulative hag, I cried out, unable to contain my anger any longer. Does Evan even know about this vile scheme? A slow, satisfied smile spread across Marla's face. Why don't you ask him yourself, dear? On cue, Evan stepped into the room, flanked by a slim, overly made-up woman I didn't recognize. Sienna, I presumed. The look of sheepish contrition on my husband's face said it all. You allowed this? Your own mother brought another woman into our marriage to bear your child? I stammered, feeling the world crumbling around me. Evan couldn't meet my eyes. Lena, we've talked about how important carrying on the family line is. So you're just going to let your mother pimp out some cheap whore to get what she wants? I screamed, uncaring of the foul language as blinding rage took over. Sienna's eyebrows shot up in feigned indignation. Evan finally looked at me, his expression hardening to match his mother's callous demeanor. This is for the greater good, Lena. My duty as a man. If you were able to do your wifely duties properly, we wouldn't need to go to such extremes. His cold, rehearsed words lanced through my heart like daggers. This was really happening. My own husband was utterly betraying me in the most humiliating way possible, all with his mother's enthusiastic support. Marla chuckled at my stunned silence. Don't worry, dear. Once Sienna properly breeds, you can focus your energy on my granddaughter. We wouldn't want you feeling completely useless. Her words ignited an indescribable fury within me that I never knew I possessed. With a primal scream, I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy ceramic vase, and hurled it with every ounce of strength. It struck Marla squarely in her smug face, shattering viciously and spraying blood and ceramic shards across the room. Sienna shrieked in horror as Marla crumpled to the floor, clutching her ruined face and howling in agony. Chest heaving, I turned to Evan, seeing the shock and fear in his eyes. In that unrestrained moment, I knew my marriage had disintegrated into ashes. There would be no forgiving this ultimate betrayal. Marla's monstrous machinations had cut straight through the very core of my world. The only thing left was vengeance. The eerie silence hung heavy in the air as Marla's wails finally subsided. I stood motionless, fists clenched, glaring at the crumpled, bleeding form of my monstrous mother-in-law on the kitchen floor. Evan stared at me with a mixture of shock and fear. Beside him, Sienna shrank back, clearly shaken by my outburst, but still clinging to her role in this sick charade. You crazy bitch! Marla's trembling voice finally broke the tension, thick with a combination of pain and rage. I'll see you arrested for this. Assaulting me in my own home. Your home? I scoffed, unable to contain the sudden resurgence of fury rippling through me. This is my home, the home I made with my husband, the man you're trying to pimp out behind my back like some kind of degenerate mother-pimping monster. Marla opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off with a raised hand. No, don't even try denying it, you hateful crone. I heard everything, how you willingly brought this woman into my marriage explicitly to cuckold your own son. I turned my fiery glare to Evan, who flinched as if struck. And you spineless coward, going along with your mother's demented plans, ready to stick your dick into the first fertile womb she picks for you. Lena, he began weakly, but I wasn't about to let him make pathetic excuses. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd just be a good little wifey while you knocked up some cheap hussy on the side? Hey! Sienna's shrill voice cut in, her fake-baked face contorting with indignation. I am not some hussy! Your bastard husband came on to me! I whirled on the overly made-up woman, feeling a cruel smile spread across my face. Did he now? So tell me, when you were spreading your legs for a very married man, did you stop to think about his innocent family you were helping to destroy? Sienna opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Deep down, even she realized how reprehensible her role was in this sordid scheme. Chuckling darkly, I turned back to Evan. Unfreaking believable. I gave you everything. A beautiful child, a loving home, an amazing life, and you were ready to just throw it all away to satisfy your mother's unhinged breeding fetish. Marla stirred, glaring up at me, her face already starting to grotesquely swell from the vase impact. "You have no one to blame but yourself, you infertile." "Enough," I roared, slamming my fist down on the counter, hard enough to make them all jump. "I have had it with your bottomless well of cruelty and manipulation. If having a son is so obsessively important, then Evan is welcome to it." Striding over to a small desk, I snatched up a pen and a sheaf of papers, thrusting them toward Evan with cheeks burning. "Separation agreement. You can have your son's situation. Your freedom to breed some new little heirs with that plastic surgery disaster over there." Evan gaped, stunned into silence. Even Sienna seemed jolted by my actions as the gravity of the situation sank in. "Well?" I demanded through gritted teeth. "Sign it and get out! Take your vile, treacherous mother and your stupid son quest and just go. I want you out of my house, out of my life." Slowly, numbly, Evan took the pen and stared at the agreement. A heavy pause seemed to blanket the room as Marla and Sienna looked on with matching expressions, a mixture of surprise and sickening satisfaction. Then, with a trembling hand, Evan scrawled his name in harsh strokes across the papers, officially ending our marriage in that single callous gesture, as his mother had always intended. Exhaling hard, I snatched the signed pages back from his hand, our eyes locking in one last, searingly intense glare. Then I turned and walked upstairs without another word, clutching the proof of my broken world and wondering how I would ever be able to piece my shattered life back together. The next few days passed in a numb blur. Evan and his mother had stormed out after the confrontation, taking their co-conspirator Sienna with them. An eerie silence descended over the house I once thought of as my loving home. I drifted aimlessly, my mind struggling to process the devastating implosion of my marriage. Logically, I knew signing those separation papers was the only recourse after Evan's unforgivable betrayal. And yet, the overwhelming sense of loss threatened to swallow me whole at times. Zoe, our 8-year-old daughter, seemed to pick up on the heavy tension despite my efforts to shield her. She became quieter, clingier, her usual bright exuberance dimming. "Mommy, where did Daddy go?" she asked one evening as we picked at our dinner in silence. I froze, unprepared for the question. Part of me wanted to proclaim the ugly truth, that her father had abandoned us to chase some atavistic need to breed an heir with another woman. But I couldn't bring myself to shatter her innocence so completely. "Daddy had to go away for a little while, honey," I hedged, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Work things." Zoe frowned, clearly picking up on my emotional disquiet. Ever the empath, just like her mother. "Are you sad, Mommy? Did you and Daddy have a fight?" "Something like that, baby," I managed, fighting back the lump swelling in my throat. "But everything will be okay, I promise." The lie tasted like ashes on my tongue, because in that moment there was no way to see how anything could ever be okay again. A sharp knock at the door jolted me from my reverie. Zoe looked up, eyes wide with something like hope. "Is that Daddy?" "Stay here, sweetie," I said quickly, rising to answer the door with trepidation curling in my stomach. But it wasn't Evan on the other side. Instead, a sharply dressed man in an expensive suit stood with a crisp folder in his hands. "Mrs. Redding," he asked brusquely without preamble, "I'm Mr. Collins, an associate of your husband's." An icy fist gripped my heart as I suddenly sensed where this was headed. The separation had clearly begun the legal fractures. "My firm has prepared these documents for you to review and sign," Mr. Collins continued, all business as he held out the folder. Hesitantly, I accepted the hefty stack of papers, dread settling like a cold stone in my gut. This was really happening, the death knell of my marriage after Evan's sickening betrayal. As I mechanically paged through the legalese, certain phrases jumped out in harsh simplicity. Petition for dissolution of marriage, rendered the covenant irreparably broken, division of assets favoring the male issue-bearing party. I felt the blood drain from my face as awful realization bloomed. This wasn't just a simple divorce agreement. It was Evan and his demonic mother wielding their wealth and influence to strip me of everything, my home, my life, my child, all in cruel pursuit of their deranged male heir vendetta. "You have 48 hours to review and sign these terms, Mrs. Redding," Mr. Collins stated flatly. "After that, my client will pursue more aggressive recourse if you fail to comply." The unmistakable threat laced his words like arsenic. Memories flashed of the unrestrained violence that ran in Marla's virulent veins, the vase, the bloodshed, of her unstoppable quest to destroy any obstacle to the grandchild she craved. My treacherous, spineless husband had clearly thrown in with his vile mother. He would stop at nothing to cut me out of his life completely, all for the unforgivable sin of bearing him a daughter instead of a son. A cold, dead feeling settled over me, the final vestige of our broken marriage crumbling to bitter ash. There would be no more tears, no more desperate pleas or self-delusions. I was truly and utterly alone now, except for my innocent little girl watching in sad confusion from the next room, the pure, bright spirit that was supposed to be my greatest joy. But in that stark moment she became my sole lifeline, my unbreakable reason to endure the coming storm. I turned to Mr. Collins, my jaw rigid. "Tell your client that after 48 hours he can expect to hear from my attorney," I stated in a toneless rasp, "because I'll be damned if I let him take my daughter too." With that, I shut the door in the lawyer's face. Then I turned and pulled a confused Zoe into my arms, holding her tiny form as if she were a life vest in a raging sea. There would be no surrender, no matter how viciously Evan and Marla tried to drown me. For Zoe's sake, I would find a way to stay afloat and make them pay dearly for their twisted sins. The next 48 hours were a blur of grim determination. I knew time was short before Evan and Marla would attempt to strip me of everything I held dear. First, I secured a shark of a divorce attorney, Caroline Weston, steely, aggressive, and with a reputation for devouring entitled rich husbands like Evan. "This is one of the most blatant, unethical cases of alienation of affection I've ever seen," Caroline stated in a cold fury after I recounted the sordid details. "We're going to crucify this bastard and his Medea of a mother." Her words kindled a flame of hope that I could indeed survive this nightmare with my daughter and some shreds of dignity intact. Next was gathering ammunition, any proof of Evan's misdeeds that could be leveraged in the coming war. I pored over financial records, discovering his company had been filtering money to an offshore account for years. Embezzlement and tax evasion, potentially criminal behavior if exposed, perfect leverage. Finally, I arranged for Zoe's temporary relocation while the legal battle raged. My sister Nina, an elementary school teacher, lived 2 states over. I knew she could shelter and care for my sweet girl while I fought in the trenches. When the 48-hour deadline arrived, I was ready, or as ready as I could be. Mr. Collins arrived promptly with the same aloof disdain as before. "I trust you've had ample time to review the terms and come to an amenable decision," he stated flatly. In response, I slid the signed divorce petition across the table, but not the one he provided. The stack of papers bore Caroline Weston's imprimatur, every word thoroughly negotiated for maximum impact. Mr. Collins' eyes flashed with surprise as he scanned the unrecognized document, his brows knitting in disapproval. "This was not the agreement we discussed. My client will need to reevaluate these terms." "These are the terms," I stated coldly. "I refuse to be bullied or stonewalled. Every nefarious act, every awful betrayal has consequences." I slid the thick dossier of financial documentation across the table, watching Mr. Collins's face blanch slightly as he grasped the implications. "Your client's illegal corporate dealings have been rigorously catalogued by very credible forensic accountants," I added with a hint of vindictive satisfaction. "Any attempt to deprive me of my legal marital rights and claim over my daughter will be met with the full public revelation of these damning records." I allowed that threat to hang in the air. Evan's ego and insecurity about his business reputation were thinly veiled weak spots, traits his vile mother had eagerly exploited countless times. Now it was my turn to wield that leverage. Mr. Collins maintained an impressively impassive poker face as he studied the documentation, though a muscle twitched almost imperceptibly in his jaw. Perhaps he was already calculating how hard this battle could hit Evan's pocketbook. "I will present this counteroffer to Mr. Redding in full," he said finally, voice tight, "contingent on these materials remaining discreet for now." "See that you do," I said simply. "The meter is running on flaying his reputation and criminal liability wide open." With a curt nod, Mr. Collins collected the documents and departed, clearly reeling from this unanticipated turn of events. For the first time in a long time, I felt the faintest spark of hope. of reclaiming some portion of my life and dignity from Evan and Marla's grasping claws. But there was still one vital loose end to secure before the war began in earnest. I turned and gathered Zoe into my arms, fighting back fresh tears at her sad, bewildered expression. "Mommy," she said tremulously, "what's happening? I want Daddy to come home." I hushed her gently, stroking her soft hair. "I know, baby, I know, but you have to go stay with Auntie Nina for a little while, okay? For your safety." Zoe's eyes widened slightly, picking up on the undercurrent of tension. But she nodded obediently. As I clutched her tiny form, I silently vowed to do whatever it took to protect my daughter's well-being, even inscribing her name permanently in the chasm dividing our family. There would be hurt and confusion, but I hoped she would eventually understand, because in the end, I would make absolutely certain that Evan and Marla paid the ultimate price for their monstrous transgressions. Once that line was crossed, there was no going back. The divorce battle erupted with a fury I could scarcely have imagined. Evan and Marla clearly felt spurned by my refusal to capitulate, and were determined to crush me through overwhelming legal force and intimidation. Caroline proved to be worth every penny, matching their team's viciousness tit for tat. Accusations and exposures flew in both directions as dark secrets were mercilessly excavated. Marla launched a public smear campaign, portraying me as an unfit mother and spouse jealous of Evan's business success. We countered by leaking details of her deranged campaign to cuckold her own son for a male heir. It was a brutal, soul-destroying process. But I refused to surrender an inch, kept afloat by my determination to maintain stability for Zoe. Finally, after 6 excruciating months, cooler heads in Evan's camp prevailed in pushing for a negotiated settlement, an end to the scorched earth hostilities before any more radioactive scandals fully combusted. I'll never forget the heavy silence that fell over the sterile conference room as our respective legal teams arrived. Evan entered, shoulders squared but eyes hollowed by the long battle. Then Marla swept in, her face still bearing the faintest scars from the vase incident, twisted into her trademark sneer. I felt a brief thrill of satisfaction that at least I'd managed to mar her unbearably smug exterior. Greetings were dispensed with, having long abandoned such niceties. We came straight to business. My client is prepared to offer a full and impartial distribution of legitimate marital assets, provided certain conditions are met, Caroline stated firmly, including permanent renunciation of custodial claims over the minor child. I could feel Marla's glare burning a hole through me. Sacrificing any claim to Zoe was the heaviest concession, but a necessary one to secure safety and healing. To her credit, Caroline didn't flinch, as well as assurances that the unconventional reproductive circumstances during the marriage remain sealed and undisclosed. A harsh jab at the twisted heir conspiracy, and a not-so-veiled threat about potential criminal repercussions. Evan shifted uncomfortably at the allusion. Marla's scowl deepened. "While such terms are highly irregular," their lead counsel replied stiffly, "we are amenable to the equity distribution, provided indemnity against future potential actions." A ugly pause lingered. They knew their financial skullduggery had been thoroughly exposed and could jeopardize not just Evan's business, but potential imprisonment. So they had no choice but to negotiate a suppression of the whole sordid truth. The tables had finally turned in my favor. Of course, so long as commitments are adhered to, the matters will remain permanently sealed, Caroline stated, her shark-like smile just a touch too wide. The negotiation continued for hours, splitting immense assets and investments down to the finest decimal point. But in the end, we hammered out an agreement, secured by both sides the mutual sustaining silence. Marla looked utterly miserable, faced with irrevocably surrendering control over her son's life and Zoe's. While still obscenely wealthy, I knew the concessions represented a profound personal defeat, which fueled my resolve. "I don't expect congratulations," Caroline told me in an undertone as the final paperwork was prepared. "This whole situation is equal parts sickening and infuriating, but you stood your ground and secured the best path for your daughter's well-being." I could only nod numbly, my strength finally waning after the marathon ordeal. There was no jubilation or catharsis, only the cold satisfaction of having survived this battle. of inflicting some semblance of consequences on Evan and Marla for their grotesque transgressions, and ensuring a future of stability for Zoe. Sliding the notarized agreement across the desk, I met Marla's seething glare one last time. "Don't ever set foot near me or my daughter again, you twisted, evil bitch." Too weary even to revel in her impotent sputtering at the insult, I simply stood and walked out, gathering the last remnants of my dignity to forge a path into this new, uncertain life. There was still one final loose end to tie up, and I intended to cut Marla's last thread of delusion with utmost precision. With the divorce settlement finalized and my financial future secured, I could finally turn my focus to rebuilding my life, our life, free from Evan and Marla's toxic orbit. My first priority was reintegrating with Zoe. The poor girl had been shuttled between relatives for months, kept at a cautious distance from the legal war zone raging between her parents. I could only imagine the confusion and hurt she must have felt. When Nina brought her home that first day, Zoe ran straight into my arms, her little body trembling with soft sobs. My heart shattered anew at her muffled cries. "I missed you so much, Mommy. I was so scared." "Shh, I know, baby," I soothed, fighting my own tears. "I missed you more than you could ever know, but it's okay now. We're going to be okay." She pulled back, her young face still so innocent yet bearing a new heaviness. "Is Daddy ever coming home?" A lump formed in my throat as I studied her deep brown eyes, so much like Evan's. How could I lie, yet also deprive her of hope? "Daddy can't be with us anymore, sweetheart," I managed carefully. "He made some choices that went against what we believe is right." Zoe's brow furrowed in confusion. "Did he do something bad?" "In a way, yes." I sighed, pulling her close again. "But you don't have to worry about any of that now. What matters is you and me and how we move forward from here, okay?" She nodded, seeming to grasp the simplicity of that concept, despite the complexities raging underneath. In that moment, I vowed to preserve her innocence, her trust, in whatever way I could. Over the following weeks, we began to rebuild our little family of two. With Evan's financial settlement, I was able to secure a fresh start, a cozy rental home away from the shattered remnants of our marriage, enroll Zoe in a new school, and realign my career trajectory in marketing communications. Slowly, smiles and warmth began returning to Zoe's youthful exuberance as our new normal solidified, no longer weighed down by that toxic undercurrent of dysfunction surrounding Evan and Marla. The only hiccup came when I received a terse communication from Sienna, Evan's former mistress, the woman he had intended to breed his heir with. "Your pathetic excuse for a husband came crawling back, in case you were wondering," her message read acidly. "But once I got a taste of his true self and that monster-in-law, I wanted no part of that dysfunctional freak show." She included documentation showing the exorbitant settlement she had demanded to preserve her silence and disappear from our lives for good. A final insult to injury, paid from my share of the divorce payout. Rather than anger, I felt only pity for Sienna's sad delusion that she'd been anything more than a dispensable pawn in Evan and Marla's twisted schemes, and I sensed her message held far more impact for them than for me. The ultimate failure and rejection of their disastrous heir-breeding plot. In a strange way, it felt like the last fading embers of that ugliness had finally burnt out completely, freeing me to turn my energy fully toward nurturing and protecting the family I did have, my ethereal bond with Zoe. There were still the occasional flare-ups from Marla's camp, grotesque tantrums lamenting her loss of control and grandchild, but I simply systemized blocking and containing her, preserving peace for Zoe at all costs. A few months after the finalized settlement, I received an awkward, rambling text from Evan out of the blue. "I know I have no right to darken your life any longer. The wreckage left behind is entirely my shame to bear. But I hope one day Zoe will understand that, despite everything, I did love her with all my heart." The words were a hollow echo, a desperate grasp for validation or absolution after his spinelessness shattered our family. I didn't bother responding, focused entirely on my new beginning, because that broken man's sad plea for sympathy couldn't reach me any longer. Not in the sanctuary of tranquility and love I had rebuilt around my beautiful daughter. Not when his vile deeds had finally caught up to him, leaving him utterly alone with his unbearable guilt. The years passed with surprising tranquility as I raised Zoe in our new peaceful life. There were moments of struggle and heartache, of course, but they paled in comparison to the constant toxicity that pervaded my marriage to Evan. As she grew into a brilliant, self-assured young woman, I made sure Zoe understood the basic truths of what tore our family apart, at least enough for her to recognize the inherent brokenness in her father and grandmother's value system. She never voiced resentment toward them, but a sort of detached pity. An intrinsic understanding of how their obsessive pursuit of an heir destroyed any possible bond. "I'm just glad I had you, Mom," she would say with a maturity beyond her years. "You were the only one who really knew what was important, family, not bloodlines." Her words simultaneously filled me with pride and profound sadness for the innocence she was forced to let wither at such a young age. But I took solace in knowing I had insulated her from the brunt of their viciousness. Until the day that seismic postscript arrived, brutally textured with karma's fury. It was a simple certified letter that appeared innocuous at first glance. But the return address, a maximum security prison, quickly turned my blood cold. With hands trembling, I tore it open to find a terse, stark message. "Mrs. Redding, I regret to inform you that your former husband, Evan Redding, has been incarcerated on charges of corporate racketeering, embezzlement, and tax evasion related to his business activities." The legalese continued, but my vision blurred as the full weight landed. Evan was going to prison for upwards of a decade, his career and reputation utterly immolated in the wake of those charges. Just like I had threatened all those years ago with my hidden evidence, a thermonuclear strike I'd hoped would never truly be detonated. Clearly, authorities had dug deeper in the aftermath of our brutal divorce and uncovered the full crater of his financial chicanery. The sick twist of satisfaction I felt soured in an instant, replaced by a mix of stunned dismay and something worse, something deeper. Remorse and empathy I didn't want to feel for that wretched man. Because no matter how unforgivable his actions, no matter how much he deserved punishment, I knew this development would utterly shatter Marla. Her whole world, her whole cancerous obsession for continuing the family empire through a male heir, would finally collapse in on itself with Evan incarcerated. She would be alone, bereft, her manipulative power machinations reduced to ashes at last. I tried to stamp out the small tendril of compassion worming through me, reminding myself of her boundless cruelty, her eagerness to obliterate my own family. Yet it persisted, the ghost of the hopeful young bride I had once been, sickened by the realization that Marla had doomed herself and her deepest desire through her very quest to obtain it. Her worldview had been her undoing. The ramifications, of course, would ripple out in unpredictable waves. What would become of their real estate empire and wealth with Evan behind bars? And more urgently, what about Zoe? I was deep in thought, rereading the letter for any clues, when the front door opened and my now-grown daughter swept in from classes. "Hi, Mom. Did you hear from—" She stopped short, taking in my pale, shaken expression. "Mom, what is it? What's wrong?" Drawing a steadying breath, I wordlessly handed her the letter. Zoe's eyes rapidly scanned the contents, her brows shooting upward in disbelief. "Oh my God, Dad's in prison?" She looked up at me, the shock and hurt palpable despite our long estrangement from Evan. I moved to pull her into a comforting embrace, stroking her hair just like when she was little. "I know, honey, I know. It's a lot to process." She held me tightly for a long moment, and I could sense her whirling thoughts settling like sediment through cloudy waters. Finally, she pulled back, eyes resolute and voice steady. "This doesn't change anything for us, Mom. His mistakes, his crimes, that's on him. We've built a good life beyond his mistakes and grandmother's madness." Zoe squeezed my hands firmly, her warm smile crackling with that resilient spirit inherited from her mother's DNA. Maybe this can be the end of it all, a fresh start, free from his shadow and her poison for good. I gazed at her with swelling pride and love, overcome by the wise perseverance blazing in her youthful eyes. She was right. As the monolithic shockwave propagated outward, Evan behind bars, Marla's world crumbling, we stood together on solid ground, free and unshaken. Perhaps this was the final cosmic realignment, setting the scales permanently even. Pulling my brave, beautiful daughter close, I felt the manacles of that dark family history begin to shed like snakeskin at last. Evan and Marla had bet everything on lies and power lust, unwittingly burrowing their shared grave. But in their defeat, in their self-ruination, I had conquered. My quiet resilience, my bond of love with Zoe had won the generational war. My only lingering words as their entitled kingdom crumbled to dust were the same ones I had snarled at Marla so many years ago. Don't ever set foot near me or my daughter again, because this time it would be permanent. The echo of Marina's whispered words sent a chill down my spine. I stood frozen, clutching the laundry basket, as her hushed conversation wafted through the open door of the guest house. Something about the tone and urgency of her voice raised every red flag within me. I know, but I need more time, she pleaded. Her voice strained. Just a few more weeks, and I swear I'll have the money. My heart raced as I realized she was talking to a man who was not my son, Adrian. A familiar knot of unease twisted in my gut. Marina's erratic behavior and constant need for cash had become a source of concern, but this conversation hinted at something more sinister. Footsteps approached, and I quickly retreated, my mind whirling with unanswered questions. As Marina emerged, her expression was one of barely contained panic. She jumped when she noticed me, her eyes wide with what looked like guilt. "Delilah, I didn't see you there," she stammered, her hand clutching her phone tightly. "Everything okay, dear?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Yes, of course," she replied with a forced smile. "Just a call about work." Work? Marina hadn't held a job in years, not since Lila was born. The lie was transparent, and it only deepened my suspicions. Over dinner that evening, Adrian and Hank remained oblivious to the tension simmering between Marina and me. Lila, our sweet 7-year-old granddaughter, chattered away, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents rippling beneath the surface. As the meal progressed, I couldn't help but study Marina's behavior. The way she fidgeted, her eyes darting around the room, the forced smiles that never quite reached her eyes. It was as if she carried a heavy burden, one she was desperate to conceal. Later that night, after everyone had retired to their rooms, I found myself pacing the living room, unable to shake the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. Marina's cryptic conversation replayed in my mind, each word amplifying the disquiet that had taken root. Hank emerged from our bedroom, his brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on, Delilah? You've been on edge all evening." I hesitated, unsure of how to voice my suspicions without sounding paranoid. But Hank's patient gaze encouraged me to open up. "It's Marina," I confessed, wringing my hands. "I overheard her on the phone earlier, and it sounded like she's in some kind of trouble, financial trouble, perhaps. She was pleading with someone for more time, promising to pay them back." Hank's expression grew grave as he absorbed my words. "Are you certain?" I nodded, recounting the details of the conversation I'd overheard. As the words tumbled out, I could see the weight of my concerns settling upon Hank's shoulders. "We need to tread carefully," he said, his voice heavy with caution. "Accusations without proof could do irreparable damage to this family." His words struck a chord, and I knew he was right, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Marina was hiding something that threatened the very fabric of our family's well-being. As I lay awake that night, my mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. One thing was certain: I would get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. The truth had to be uncovered, even if it meant shattering the fragile peace we had so carefully cultivated. In the days that followed, a palpable tension lingered in our home. I found myself constantly on edge, scrutinizing Marina's every move, searching for any clues that might shed light on her mysterious behavior. The truth was, I distrusted her, a realization that filled me with guilt, but one I couldn't ignore. It started with small things: a missing piece of jewelry, a few dollars gone from my purse. Insignificant incidents, perhaps, but they felt like threads in a larger tapestry of deceit. Marina's excuses rang hollow, her explanations riddled with holes that only deepened my suspicions. "I must have misplaced it," she'd say, waving away my concerns with a casual shrug. But the glint in her eyes betrayed her nonchalance, hinting at something more sinister lurking beneath the surface. Then came the larger transgressions, the ones that couldn't be easily dismissed. Unexplained withdrawals from our joint bank account, purchases of expensive clothing and accessories that seemed far beyond her means. Marina's once frugal ways had given way to a newfound taste for luxury, and I couldn't help but wonder where the money was coming from. "It's just a little treat for myself," she'd insist, flashing a dazzling smile that did little to mask the calculating gleam in her eyes. Hank tried to reason with me, urging caution and patience. "We can't make accusations without proof," he'd remind me, his voice laced with concern. But I couldn't shake the gnawing sense that something was terribly wrong, and Marina was at the center of it all. It was during one of our hushed conversations that a plan began to take shape. A way to catch Marina in the act, to unravel the web of deception she'd so carefully woven. With Hank's reluctant approval, I began marking the bills in our cash box, a silent trap waiting to be sprung. The days ticked by, each one more tense than the last. Marina's behavior grew increasingly erratic, her absences more frequent and her excuses more flimsy. It was as if she knew the walls were closing in, and she was scrambling to maintain her facade of normalcy. Then, one fateful afternoon, I caught her red-handed. I'd returned home unexpectedly, only to find Marina rifling through my dresser drawers. Her eyes went wide with panic when she saw me, and she instinctively tried to hide the bundle of marked bills clutched in her trembling hand. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Marina's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing into slits of defiance. "You have no right to accuse me," she spat, her words laced with venom. "You're just a paranoid old woman, grasping at shadows." Her words stung, but I refused to back down. "Those are my bills, Marina, the ones I marked specifically to catch you in the act." For a moment, she faltered, her mask of indignation slipping. But then, just as quickly, it snapped back into place, and she unleashed a torrent of denials and accusations, painting me as the villain in her twisted narrative. Hank rushed in, alerted by the commotion, and tried to play peacemaker. But Marina would have none of it, storming out and leaving a trail of chaos in her wake. As I watched her retreating figure, a sense of grim determination settled over me. The game was up, the truth laid bare. Marina's betrayal had been exposed, and now the real battle was just beginning. The air was thick with tension as we all gathered in the living room. Marina sat rigidly on the couch, her arms crossed defensively, while Adrian paced back and forth, his expression etched with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "This is absurd," Marina spat, her eyes flashing with defiance. "How dare you accuse me of stealing?" I steeled myself, clutching the bundle of marked bills like a lifeline. "These are the same bills I marked, Marina. I found them in your possession, hidden in my dresser drawer." Adrian's head whipped around, his gaze shifting between us like a pendulum. "What's going on?" "Someone needs to explain this to me right now." Hank placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, his silent support bolstering my resolve. "We caught Marina stealing from us. Son, she's been taking money, jewelry, anything she could get her hands on." Marina recoiled as if she'd been slapped, her expression contorting into one of outrage. "How dare you? You're both delusional, grasping at straws to suit your twisted little narrative." "We have proof, Marina," I said, my voice firm. "These marked bills are all the evidence we need." "That proves nothing," she snapped, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're just looking for an excuse to turn Adrian against me." Adrian flinched, his face pale with shock. "Marina, please, tell me this isn't true." For a moment Marina faltered, her mask of defiance slipping ever so slightly. But then, just as quickly, she rallied, turning her venomous gaze on her husband. "Of course it's not true, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "Your mother has become unhinged in her old age. She's seeing things that aren't there, twisting innocent actions into some grand conspiracy." My heart sank as Adrian's eyes clouded with doubt. Marina had played her trump card, exploiting the unbreakable bond between mother and son. "Mom, I don't know what to believe," Adrian stammered, his eyes pleading with me to retract my accusations. Before I could respond, Marina pounced, her words slicing through the air like daggers. "Your mother has always resented me, Adrian. She's never accepted me into this family, and now she's trying to drive a wedge between us." Tears of frustration stung my eyes as I watched Marina's manipulation take hold. She was a master of deception, weaving her lies with surgical precision, playing on Adrian's love and loyalty like a virtuoso. "That's not true," I protested, my voice cracking with emotion. "I'm only trying to protect this family from her deceit." Adrian shook his head, his expression clouded with a mixture of hurt and confusion. "I can't. I don't know what to believe anymore." Marina seized the opportunity, wrapping her arms around him in a gesture of false comfort. "It's okay, my love. We'll get through this, just like we always do." As I watched them embrace, the bitter taste of defeat filled my mouth. Marina had won this round, her lies and manipulations carrying the day. But deep within me, an ember of determination still burned, fueled by the knowledge that the truth was on my side. This was far from over. In the aftermath of Marina's blatant lies and Adrian's misguided loyalty, a palpable rift had formed within our family. The once warm and inviting atmosphere had given way to a chilling tension, each of us trapped in our own emotional turmoil. Marina strutted around the house with a smug air of victory, her every action a silent taunt, a reminder of the wedge she'd driven between us. Her deceit had taken root, casting doubt and suspicion like a noxious cloud that threatened to consume us all. Hank, bless his heart, tried his best to remain the voice of reason. "We need concrete evidence," he'd say, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination, "something that can't be twisted or denied." His words struck a chord within me, reigniting the flames of my resolve. If Marina wanted a war, then a war she would have. I would not rest until the truth was laid bare, no matter the cost. With Hank's reluctant approval, I took the first step in my quest for vindication, installing hidden cameras throughout the house. It felt like a violation of trust, but Marina's betrayal had left me with little choice. Day after day, I pored over the footage, documenting every suspicious movement, every whispered conversation, every unexplained absence. Each new piece of evidence was like a puzzle piece, slowly revealing the bigger picture of Marina's deceit. I became a prisoner in my own home, haunted by the ghosts of Marina's lies. Sleep evaded me, my nights consumed by the flickering images on the monitor, searching for that one damning moment that would unravel her carefully constructed web of deception. Marina, oblivious to my covert surveillance, grew bolder in her actions. Her spending spiraled out of control, designer handbags and expensive jewelry adorning her like trophies of her conquest. And all the while she played the part of the doting wife and mother, her lies growing more elaborate with each passing day. It was during one of these sleepless nights that I found an unlikely ally in my quest for the truth. An old friend from my nursing days, a former police officer named Cynthia, had reached out after sensing my distress. Over cups of strong coffee and whispered confidences, I poured out the sordid details of Marina's betrayal, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. Cynthia listened intently, her eyes filled with a combination of sympathy and steely determination. "You need to document everything," she urged, her voice firm but laced with compassion. "Every lie, every unexplained expense, every suspicious action. Build an airtight case that even Adrian can't ignore." Her words ignited a newfound sense of purpose within me. I would become a one-woman investigation team, leaving no stone unturned in my quest to expose Marina's duplicity. With Cynthia's guidance, I began meticulous documentation, cross-referencing bank statements, receipts, and eyewitness accounts. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the fortress I was building, a bastion of truth that would withstand even Marina's most vicious assaults. As the days turned into weeks, the strain of my double life began to take its toll. Marina's barbed comments and dismissive glances cut deeper with each passing day, reminding me of the precarious position I found myself in. But through it all, Cynthia remained my unwavering rock, a beacon of support in the storm of Marina's lies. Her friendship became a lifeline, sustaining me through the darkest moments when doubt threatened to consume me. Little did Marina know, the walls were closing in. The truth was a relentless hunter, and I was its unyielding pursuer. Her reign of deception was nearing its end, and soon she would face the consequences of her actions. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation, a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of our family, and this time there would be no escape from the harsh light of truth. As the days ticked by, the strain of my covert investigation began to take its toll. Sleep became a fleeting luxury, replaced by endless hours spent hunched over the monitor, scouring the footage for any shred of evidence that could unravel Marina's web of lies. Cynthia became my lifeline. Her steadfast support and unwavering belief in my cause, the only thing keeping me afloat. Our meetings grew more frequent, our conversations a safe haven where I could voice my fears and frustrations without judgment. "She's unraveling, Cynthia," I confided one evening, my voice laced with exhaustion. "The more evidence I gather, the more reckless she becomes." Cynthia nodded grimly, her eyes reflecting a grim understanding. "Cornered animals are often the most dangerous. Marina knows the walls are closing in, and she's lashing out in desperation." Her words rang true. Marina's behavior had become increasingly erratic, her lies more brazen, and her actions more reckless. It was as if she believed she had already won, that her manipulation of Adrian had granted her immunity from consequence. "She's spending like there's no tomorrow," I lamented, rifling through a stack of bank statements. "Expensive jewelry, designer clothes, lavish outings. It's like she's flaunting her ill-gotten gains right in front of us." Cynthia's brow furrowed as she studied the documentation I had meticulously compiled. "She's overconfident, sloppy. That's good for us. It means she's making mistakes." I nodded, my jaw clenched with determination, "and I'll be there to catch every single one of them." With each passing day, the rift within our family grew wider, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Adrian remained steadfastly loyal to Marina, dismissing my concerns as unfounded paranoia fueled by resentment. "Mom, you need to let this go," he pleaded, his eyes filled with a mixture of exasperation and concern. "Marina loves us, and your constant accusations are tearing this family apart." His words cut deep, but I refused to back down. "I'm only trying to protect us, Adrian. Can't you see what she's doing?" Marina would swoop in during these moments, playing the role of the devoted wife to perfection. "Your mother is blinded by her irrational hatred for me," she cooed, her eyes brimming with false tears. "She's become consumed by this vendetta, and it's poisoning her mind." Adrian would pull her close, casting reproachful glances in my direction as he comforted his wife, the woman I knew to be a master manipulator. These scenes played out with increasing frequency, each one chipping away at my resolve. But Cynthia's unwavering support kept me grounded, her friendship a lifeline in the storm of Marina's deceit. "Don't let her get to you," Cynthia urged, her voice firm but laced with compassion. "She's playing mind games, trying to break your spirit. But you're stronger than that, Delilah. You have the truth on your side." Her words reignited the flame of determination within me. I would not be deterred, not by Marina's lies or her emotional manipulation. The truth was my shield, and I would wield it like a sword, cutting through the tangled web of deception that had ensnared my family. As the evidence mounted, so too did the weight of the burden I carried. Sleep became elusive, replaced by fitful slumbers haunted by Marina's betrayal. But I refused to falter, driven by a singular purpose, to expose the truth and restore the sanctity of our family. Little did Marina know, her reign of deception was nearing its end. The final confrontation loomed on the horizon, a reckoning that would shake the foundations of our lives, and this time there would be no escape from the harsh light of truth. The air was thick with tension as we gathered around the dining table for our weekly family dinner. Marina, ever the master of deception, wore a mask of serene domesticity, busying herself with serving platters and making small talk as if nothing were amiss. Adrian, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface, chatted amiably about his work, his eyes filled with a love and devotion that made my heart ache. How could he not see the monster he had welcomed into our home, into our lives? Hank shot me a sidelong glance, his expression a silent plea for restraint. But the time for patience had passed. The evidence I had painstakingly gathered was irrefutable, and I could no longer stand idly by as Marina's lies poisoned our family. As Marina placed the final dish on the table, I cleared my throat, the sound cutting through the forced conviviality like a knife. "Before we begin, there's something we need to address." Marina's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing as she sensed the shift in the atmosphere. "What is it, Delilah?" I leveled my gaze at her, steeling myself for the battle to come. I know what you've been doing, Marina. The stealing, the lies, the secret meetings. I have proof of all of it. A hush fell over the table as Adrian and Hank exchanged bewildered glances. Marina, for her part, maintained her facade of innocence, a sickly sweet smile curling her lips. I don't know what you're talking about, she demurred, her voice dripping with false sincerity. These accusations are baseless and hurtful. Enough with the lies, I snapped, my patience finally fraying. I have footage of you rifling through our belongings, taking money and valuables. I have documentation of your secret rendezvous and unexplained expenditures. Marina's mask slipped, her expression contorting into one of barely contained fury. You've been spying on me? In my own home? Our home, corrected, my voice firm. The home you've been systematically robbing and betraying with your deceit. Adrian's eyes widened, his gaze flickering between us as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Marina, is this true? Marina turned towards him, her eyes brimming with crocodile tears. Of course not, my love. Your mother has become unhinged, consumed by her irrational hatred for me. Don't listen to her lies, Adrian, I pleaded, my voice thick with emotion. I have proof, irrefutable evidence of her betrayal. With trembling hands, I produced the damning footage, the grainy images flickering to life on the small screen. Marina's face drained of color as she watched herself slinking through the house, pocketing valuables and sneaking out at odd hours. Adrian recoiled as if he'd been struck, his eyes boring into the incriminating evidence with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Marina, how could you? Marina's composure cracked, her mask of innocence shattering like fragile glass. You stupid, meddling old woman, she spat, her words laced with venom. You've ruined everything. In that moment, the veneer of civility fell away, revealing the true depths of Marina's depravity. She launched into a tirade of accusations and denials, her voice rising to a fever pitch as she lashed out like a cornered animal. Adrian simply sat there, stunned into silence, his world crumbling around him. Hank tried to intervene, his voice a calming balm in the midst of the storm. Marina, please, let's all take a deep breath and— No, she snarled, her eyes wild with fury. I'm done playing by your rules, done with all of your lies and manipulations. With a violent sweep of her arm, she sent the dishes crashing to the floor, shattering porcelain and scattering food in a chaotic mess. Lila, our sweet granddaughter, let out a terrified wail, her eyes wide with fear. In that moment, something shifted within Marina. Her expression hardened, her lips curling into a sneer of pure contempt. You want the truth, Delilah? Fine. The truth is, I've been bleeding this family dry for months, and none of you were smart enough to catch on. The words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, their impact rendering us all speechless. Marina had finally shown her true colors, and the sight was as horrifying as it was vindicating. As she stormed out, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in months, I had hoped that our family could heal, that we could rebuild from the ashes of Marina's betrayal and emerge stronger, united by the bonds of love and loyalty. The war was won, but the scars would linger. And as I held Lila close, shielding her from the fallout, I silently vowed that no matter what lay ahead, I would protect my family with every fiber of my being. The truth had set us free, but at what cost? The silence that followed Marina's explosive outburst was deafening, a palpable weight that seemed to press down upon us all. Adrian sat motionless, his face ashen, his eyes fixed on the space where his wife had stood moments earlier, hurling her venomous words like daggers. Hank was the first to break the spell, his voice low and measured. Son, I'm so sorry. We tried to warn you, but— Adrian held up a trembling hand, silencing his father. Don't. Just don't. I watched helplessly as my son's world crumbled around him, the foundations of his life stripped bare by the harsh light of truth. Marina's betrayal had cut him to the core, and I ached to offer him comfort, to soothe the wounds inflicted by the woman he had loved and trusted. But before I could speak, the door creaked open, and Marina slunk back into the room, her eyes red-rimmed and her shoulders slumped in defeat. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a weary resignation that hung like a shroud around her slight frame. Adrian, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I owe you an explanation. Adrian stiffened, his jaw clenched, but he remained silent, granting her the opportunity to speak. Marina took a shuddering breath, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. It started innocently enough, a few dollars here and there, just to feed my habit. My brow furrowed as the pieces began to fall into place. Habit? What are you talking about? Marina's gaze flickered to me, her eyes haunted. Gambling. I have a problem, one that spiraled out of control. A collective gasp rippled through the room as the truth finally came to light. Marina, the woman we had welcomed into our family, the mother of our precious granddaughter, was a gambling addict, and she had been systematically bleeding us dry to fuel her addiction. How could you? Adrian's voice was a hoarse whisper, laced with heartbreak and disbelief. How could you betray us like this? Marina flinched as if struck, her eyes brimming with remorseful tears. It started small, just a few dollars here and there to scratch the itch. But then the losses mounted, and I found myself digging a deeper and deeper hole, desperate to chase that high, to win it all back. Her words hung in the air, their weight suffocating. I thought back to all the signs, the unexplained expenditures, the missing valuables, all the breadcrumbs leading to this sordid truth. And Lila? Hank's voice was tight, his expression inscrutable. Did you involve our granddaughter in your schemes? Marina's head bowed in shame, her shoulders trembling with silent sobs. I did. I manipulated her, promised her lavish gifts if she helped me take a few things here and there. A collective gasp of horror echoed through the room, and I felt my heart constrict with a pain so acute it stole my breath away. Marina had not only betrayed our trust, but had also corrupted the innocence of our sweet Lila, using her as a pawn in her twisted game. Adrian shot to his feet, his face contorted with rage. "Get out!" he growled, his voice thick with barely contained fury. "Get out of my house and never come back." Marina opened her mouth as if to protest, but one look at Adrian's thunderous expression seemed to quell any further objections. With a defeated nod, she rose to her feet and made her way towards the door, each step heavy with the weight of her sins. As she reached the threshold, she turned back, her eyes pleading. "Adrian, please, let me see Lila. I'll get help, I promise. Just don't take her away from me." But Adrian's resolve was unshakable, his love for his wife eclipsed by the depths of her betrayal. "You lost that right the moment you involved our daughter in your schemes. I'll be filing for full custody first thing in the morning." Marina's face crumpled, but she offered no further resistance. With a broken sob, she turned and disappeared into the night, leaving a trail of shattered lives in her wake. As the door closed behind her, a heavy silence descended upon the room, punctuated only by the muffled sound of Lila's whimpers from the next room. In that moment, the weight of Marina's deceit crashed down upon us all, a tsunami of grief and anger that threatened to consume us whole. But even as the tides of emotion surged, I felt a glimmer of hope flicker to life within me. The truth, no matter how painful, had been laid bare, and from these ashes we would rebuild, one step at a time, one day at a time, until the wounds had healed and the scars had faded. It would be a long and arduous journey, but we would walk it together, as a family united by our love and our resilience. Marina's betrayal would not define us, it would be the catalyst for our rebirth, a crucible from which we would emerge stronger, wiser, and more tightly bound than ever before. As I reached out to gather Adrian and Lila into my embrace, I silently vowed that no matter what lay ahead, we would face it together, fortified by the unbreakable bonds of family and the healing power of truth. The days that followed Marina's explosive confession were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. Adrian, steadfast in his resolve, wasted no time in filing for divorce and seeking full custody of Lila. "She doesn't get to slither back into our lives after what she's done," he declared, his voice laced with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "Not until she's paid her debt to society and proven herself worthy of being a part of Lila's life again." As much as it pained me to see my son suffering, I couldn't help but swell with pride at the unwavering strength he displayed in the face of such devastating betrayal. Marina's deceit had cut him to the core, but instead of crumbling, he had risen like a phoenix from the ashes, driven by an unshakable determination to protect his daughter. The legal process was arduous, fraught with contentious hearings and bitter confrontations. Marina, perhaps sensing the gravity of her transgressions, offered little resistance, her once defiant spirit broken by the weight of her lies. In the end, justice prevailed. Marina was ordered to not only repay the staggering sum of money she had stolen from our family, but also to undergo a court-mandated rehabilitation program to address her gambling addiction. As for Lila, the judge granted Adrian full custody, with Marina receiving strictly supervised visitation rights, a harsh but necessary measure to ensure our granddaughter's well-being in the aftermath of her mother's deplorable actions. "She'll have the chance to rebuild her relationship with Lila," Adrian told me, his eyes shining with a mixture of resolution and cautious hope. "But only if she proves herself worthy of that privilege." Marina's sentencing was a bittersweet moment, a culmination of months of anguish and turmoil. As she stood before the judge, her shoulders slumped in defeat, I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity amid the overwhelming sense of vindication. This woman, who had once been welcomed into our family with open arms, had fallen so far, consumed by the demons of her own making. Her descent into depravity had not only cost her our trust, but had also robbed her of the love and respect of her own daughter. As the gavel fell, sealing her fate, I saw a flicker of remorse in Marina's eyes. A fleeting glimpse of the person she might have been, untainted by the insidious grip of addiction. In that moment, I realized that true revenge lay not in her suffering but in our perseverance, our unwavering commitment to healing the wounds she had inflicted upon our family. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but we were ready to face it head-on, bolstered by the unbreakable bonds that had been forged in the crucible of Marina's betrayal. Hank and I became a constant presence in Adrian and Lila's lives, offering unwavering support and stability in the wake of their upheaval. Slowly but surely, we began to piece together the fragments of our fractured family, building anew on the foundations of love, trust, and resilience. Lila, bless her heart, proved to be our greatest source of strength and hope. Her innocent spirit, untainted by the darkness of her mother's actions, was a beacon that guided us through the darkest of times. "Why did Mommy do those bad things?" she would ask, her eyes wide and imploring. And in those moments, we would gather her close, assuring her that while her mother had made grave mistakes, she still loved her. A love that would have to be earned anew through painstaking effort and unwavering commitment. As the months passed, the wounds began to heal, though the scars would forever serve as a reminder of the price we had paid for the truth. Marina, to her credit, seemed to embrace her court-mandated rehabilitation, her visits with Lila becoming less strained and more genuine with each passing week. It was during one such visit, as I watched Marina and Layla engage in a tentative yet tender exchange, that I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The anger and resentment that had once consumed me had given way to a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the resilience of my family, for the strength we had found in adversity, and for the unbreakable bonds that had carried us through the storm. As Marina bid farewell to Lila, her eyes shone with a newfound clarity, a glimmer of the woman she had once been, untainted by the darkness that had nearly consumed her. In that moment, I realized that true victory lay not in her suffering, but in our ability to rise above it, to emerge from the ashes of her betrayal stronger, wiser, and more tightly bound than ever before. The road ahead would undoubtedly be paved with challenges, but we were ready to face them head-on, fortified by the unwavering love and support that had seen us through our darkest hours. As I watched Adrian and Lila laugh and play in the warm embrace of our family, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The truth had set us free, but it had also revealed the depths of our resilience and the unbreakable bonds that truly defined us. We were survivors, warriors forged in the fires of adversity, and nothing, not even the cruelest of betrayals, could ever dim the light that burned within our hearts.